my baby. Get right back to What's up, everybody? This is Vivian Green, and you're listening to the podcast on WilLaVeist.com.
Thanks for tuning in to the Wil LaVeist Show, a science, tech, and pop culture mix. It's the Wil LaVeist Show. This next segment, during Hampton University's 145th commencement, keynote speaker was U.S. Congressman John Lewis, who told the 847 graduates that it was their moral obligation to do what they can to bring about positive change in the world. Lewis said, and I quote, "You have to find a way to get in the way, get in trouble, use it to bring about a nonviolent revolution." Lewis's book series, March, is a graphic novel that provides a first-hand account of the Congress's lifelong struggle for civil and human rights. Here's that interview with Congressman John Lewis. Congressman John Lewis, Democrat of Georgia, thanks for being on the Wil LaVeist Show.
Well, thank you. Happy and very pleased to be on the show.
The book is a series.
Yeah, it's three books. March, book 1, book 2, and we're working on book 3. Mm-hmm. And it's tell my life story in very dramatic and in graphic form. When you pick it up and see the images, you just make it real, make it very simple. So a lot of people reading it, a lot of young people, elementary school students, middle school, high school, college kids. Matter of fact, the book been adopted and made the required reading by several major colleges and universities for all freshman students. We tell the story of my early growing up in rural Alabama, outside of a little town called Troy, 50 miles from Montgomery. Growing up on a farm, attending segregated schools, hearing about Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., meeting Rosa Parks in 1957 when I was 17, meeting Dr. King in 1958, the age of 18, and been deeply inspired by the two of them. As so inspired that in 1956, with some of my brothers and sisters and cousins, we went down to the public library trying to check out some books, trying to get library cards. And we were told by the librarian that the library was for white only and not for coloreds. So I never went back to this little library in Troy, Alabama, to July 5th, 1998, for a book signing of my first book, Walking with the Wind. And hundreds of blacks and white citizens showed up. At the end of the book signing, end of the program, they gave me a library card. And it traced mine going off to school in Nashville in 1957 and spending 6 years there at American Baptist and Fisk University. Getting involved in the sit-ins, the Freedom Ride, standing in at theaters, getting arrested.
And a lot of that was triggered by reading.
Yeah, and just reading. When I heard about Rosa Parks and met her and hearing about Dr. King, hearing his words on the radio, it inspired me. And I said to myself, if the people in Montgomery can do it, we can do it. I didn't like segregation. I didn't like racial discrimination. I didn't like the signs that I saw saying white waiting, colored waiting, white men, white women, colored women. So I would ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, why? And they would say, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. But the action of Dr. King and Rosa Parks inspired me to get in trouble. And I got in trouble, what I call good trouble. And that's what I've been telling students, and that's what we're telling them in these books, to get in trouble and to speak up when you see something that is not right, not fair, not just. You have an obligation to do something about it.
We're in a country in an era where a lot of students have been getting engaged, getting involved over, unfortunately, police shooting black males. Your initial reaction, the shocking video, South Carolina, and the uprising that happened in Baltimore, Freddie Gray. Your initial reaction and student involvement in those kinds of issues.
Well, it reminded me to some degree of the early and mid-'60s, and to another degree, even back in the 40s and the 50s, when some people thought they can do anything to African American and especially African American males and get away with it. The way Emmett Till was murdered back in 1955. I was 15 years old in the 10th grade, but I remember that so well. I read about it. I saw his open cassette in Jet magazine, and I kept thinking this could happen to some of my cousins, first cousin who lived in Buffalo, New York, and when they would come home during the summer to spend time with us. So I grew up just trying to find a way to do something, and Dr. King and Rosa Parks provided the avenue.
Well, it's got to be shocking to you to know that you lived through that you've been working all these years in Congress to try to eliminate that very thing. And then here we are, 2015, and we're facing the same things again. What do you say to people? I mean, that's got to be painful to you.
Well, it is very painful to see, on one hand, we've come such a distance, we made progress, but seeing like, on the other hand, we are sliding backward. And I don't see enough righteous indignation. I don't see that many people speaking up and speaking out and saying, let's stop this. But it's very encouraging to me right now to see the role of black and white college students, black and white young people playing, and to see at this particular time in our history, to see a black woman as the Attorney General of the United States, and to see in a place like Baltimore this young black sister as the solicitor, as a prosecutor. And I think women, along with young people, are going to play a major role, because these are our boys, these are our sons, and we cannot let this continue to happen.
You mentioned the Attorney General, the mayor of Baltimore as well, black woman, as well as the attorney that's going to be prosecuting the case regarding the police officers and Freddie Gray. But a lot of people are very upset that a lot of these things are happening under the watch of black people being in power. Your generation fought. You don't have enough black people in position of power. Now we have them, and these things are still happening. The devastation that exists in West Baltimore that gave birth to this conflict between the police and the community and this unrest has been allowed to exist under black leadership. But what are your thoughts regarding black leaders?
Black leaders, we all must do more, much more. It's Baltimore today, yesterday was Ferguson, and tomorrow it will be some other place. It's a wake-up call for black leadership.
But do you think if folks understood the arc of history, people like you are there explaining to them the arc of history and the role, how can they get in these positions of power and then still allow and not do enough? How can they not know what their role is to do?
I think to some degree their power or our power are limited. It's not just power but resources. We need hundreds and thousands and millions and billions of dollars to make things happen. The late A. Philip Randolph, a wonderful man, wonderful brother, many, many years ago, he made a proposal of a freedom budget, and we didn't listen to him. There's still a need for a massive intervention on the part of not just the federal government, or state or local government, but on this part of the business community, foundations, and others. You must have this infusion in the heart of these poor communities and neighborhoods. If not, the unrest and the sense of discontent and the fires of frustration will consume us all.
Yeah, because that's what the Kerner Commission report established in 1968, and here we are in 2015.
That's right.
And we still haven't executed fully.
And maybe we would take heed to what the Kerner Commission said in effect. Because if we had listened to national government, state, and other, we would be much better off as a people and a nation.
The Black Caucus, for example, its role was to look out for these very issues and to bring focus to these issues. But yet, for example, the Black Caucus, the war on drugs happened under the watch of the Black Caucus, and many members actually voted for it. And a lot of people are pointing to the war on drugs as having exacerbated the situation and condition that exists in West Baltimore, that exists in communities like Ferguson, you name it, here in Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Portsmouth, and New York. What's your response to your colleagues at the Black Caucus who, again, are in position of power, came in, knew what their role was in terms of the black community, and these very policies that have devastated the black community, everyone agrees at this point, have devastated the black community, happened under your watch?
Yeah. Well, during the early part of my own involvement with the caucus, and especially when President Clinton became president, he tried to get us to support a crime bill, and I refused to support it.
Yeah, you and Conyers, I think.
Kanye and Rangel. Matter of fact, President Clinton called me one night at home trying to convince me to vote for rules so it can bring the crime bill up. And so I didn't return his call. And he invited me down to the White House. I went down with Charlie Rangel. And he said, "John, when did you get my call?" I said, "A few days ago, Mr. President." He said, "Why you didn't return my call?" I said, "I didn't want to talk to you." I said, "I didn't want to talk to you because I know what you wanted." And so he convinced us to vote for the rules to get the bill to the floor, but when the bill came to the floor, we still voted against it. And you've had individuals, Barbara Scott, for one, probably more than any member of the Black Caucus, been trying to do something about the sentences, the unequal sentences.
Right.
And now you have black members, liberal members, and some of the most conservative Republicans coming together saying we got to do something about unequal sentences. And we continue to warehouse hundreds and thousands, millions of people. And it doesn't make sense.
So what happens when you're talking with your colleagues? Because, for example, you mentioned Rangel. And Rangel, you know, in the beginning, in the Nixon era, Rangel was one of the champions for the war on drugs. Right. I mean, very much was making his career on that.
Well, I think that was a mistake on the part of many members, liberal members, black members, to go down that road. Because the problem that we're having today, a lot of men, especially young African-American men, looking for work, want a job, but they say over and over again, I applied and discover that I have a record.
Right, arrested on drug offenses, pulled away from their families, in prison. A lot of times they were minor or nonviolent offenses. So it devastated the community. Then you hear now people are saying the problem is that black men are not in the home. A big reason why they're not in the home because you took them out of the home because of your government policies. Took them out of the home.
And there need to be major reform of our criminal justice system. There need to be, why continue to warehouse people? Why continue to lock people up for committing nonviolent offenses, really?
I was at an event in Baltimore. One of your colleagues, Elijah Cummings, spoke very passionately. It was an event for the Links Incorporated. And he spoke, he was one of the honored guests there. He spoke passionately about the fact that you're put in this position to be blessed so that you can turn around and be blessed. And he shared the story of his parents sending him off to college and telling him that you're going to college. I think it was Howard University he said he went to be blessed so you can turn around and bless others. Do you think some black politicians are disconnected, have lost sight of that? What I mean, you're there with them. Well, you see these people.
I don't want to sit in judgment on any of my colleagues. But I think we all must do more than just get elected and hold a position. We have to be out there pushing and pulling. If we fail to do that, then we're not doing what Elijah Cummings is suggesting that we must do. We have an obligation to do it. If we've been blessed, we got to pass it on. We got to play a role and do our part. I think to some degree we all are too silent. We're too quiet. We need to make some noise. And we lost the ability, we lost the capacity to make some noise, to get in the way. I tell kids all the time, you have to get in the way and disturb the order of things, really.
What do you think happened when you say lost, when we lost it? What do you think happened that caused that loss? Knowing what you've gone through, and if you know your history, it's hard to be in your presence and not feel inspired and not want to do something. And I'm not saying that to pat you on the shoulder. I think you what you said earlier. You heard Martin Luther King, and you were inspired. It's hard to be in somebody's presence that you know is committed and they've done things, and not be inspired to do something. So how do you think people lost, that ability to understand that they have a role to fulfill?
Well, I think it's this feeling that we've made a certain amount of progress, and maybe we can rest or slow down. But we cannot rest. We cannot slow down because a generation are coming on. They're young people. And a lot of our young people, a lot of our children, they don't know the story. We fail to teach them. And that's what we're trying to do with the book. Inform them, infuse them, that they too can do something. They too can stand up. It was the children of Birmingham, the children of Selma, the children of Southwest Georgia. If they can do it, then these kids today that are getting a much better education, they have the new technology, they know how to use all these gadgets and social media. I often think if we'd had a website, these different type of
apps on the phone.
Sure, I don't know what we would have been able to do. We didn't have a cellular telephone. We didn't have a fax machine. We had an old mimeograph machine. But we did what we could. And now I think we have to teach others to use what they have to bring about what I like to call a nonviolent revolution.
I'm glad you said nonviolent. I was just going to ask you about that. That one of the things that people see in the movie Selma that depicts the role of you and a lot of other giants in the civil rights movement, and also people who are not as well known. You see the commitment, and that is, you see a sense of the strategy that went on behind the scenes, and how you all were trained and understood what you were coming up against. Do you see that type of intellectual approach and strategy in what we see in terms of the uprisings that are going on today? Do you see that there? Does it concern you that there's not more of an emphasis on nonviolent, direct action and what that is really all about?
I am deeply concerned that we do not have enough people that are committed to get out there and discuss and debate the question of nonviolent action. And we don't need our young people to repeat our mistakes, but to get out there and learn from what we did. I think in the long run they can be much more effective. I said to some of my friends that came out of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and some of these young people today, and some of them about my age and not so young, that we need to be conducting nonviolent workshops all over America.
You're saying even now?
Even now. Oh, yes, we need to do it. I believe the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence is one of those immutable principles. If you're going to move toward creating a community at peace with itself, a way of peace, a way of love, then somehow the means must justify the end, or the end and means must be caught up together. You cannot separate the two. I think I've been talking to people about the possibility of getting law enforcement people, police officers, police commissioner, mayors and governors, all to conduct a nonviolent workshop, teaching police officers to respect the dignity and the worth of every human being. Treat people with a sense of respect.
Yeah, because when you're violent towards, you might crush your opponent temporarily,
Right.
but eventually the animosity that is created, they're going to rise
That's right.
back up. I
That's
mean, we
right.
see that going on all over the world.
That's right.
People are rising up because of that pent-up animosity that's been
right.
shared from
Well,
generations.
I said from time to time that if we can get it right, if we can get it right here in America, maybe it could be used as a model for the rest of the world. But we got to be daring. We got to be creative.
We're here on a Hampton University's campus, historic Black College. Do you think that that's something that Black colleges, the HBCUs, could be the first location where that kind of teaching goes
Well,
forward?
I think it would be very, very meaningful if you had on the majority of the black colleges and universities in America teaching courses, having workshops and seminars on the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. Go and look at some of the stories told by Martin Luther King Jr. and Ella Baker, this black woman who attended Shaw University in North Carolina, and even at a ripe age, she was still so radical. And I think if we could hear her voice, especially with young black women, but also young black men and young children, I think people will grow up different. They will have a message to carry to the neighborhoods and their communities.
You're a Fisk University graduate. Obviously, you have a love for black colleges. A lot of people would say, with what is happening in higher education, that black colleges are in trouble. Talk a little bit about why black colleges are still important and maybe some of the challenges that you see that black colleges have brought on themselves.
Well, black colleges are still a must. We need them now more than ever before. In so many communities all over America, there's still first generation African Americans getting a college education. These institutions have something very special to offer, to nurture, to build, and give people this sense of family, this sense of community, that we care about you. We want you to do your best. And I think people can learn so much from the history of the institution and the commitment of the leaders of these institutions. If it hadn't been for black colleges and universities, I don't know what would have happened to us as a people.
Does it concern you, some of the declines in enrollment, and some people have charged that you've got some leadership problems at some of the universities that are not doing well, not only just the presidents, but a lot of the boards, and you see almost a carousel of a lot of failed presidents going from one school to another. The schools themselves may be doing that they should be doing better or different.
Black colleges and universities should seek to be the very best, but they should let administrators run the school. People who have some know-how, some skill in building an institution, building an organization, raising the necessary funds, and try to hire the best possible people to teach, and make a case with the federal government, the state government, and with private sector, foundation, the business community, to get the necessary resources. Because there's too many of our young people are not making it. They're not going to college. They're falling by the wayside.
And the cost of college is skyrocketing.
It's a shame and a disgrace the way the cost is increasing. And so many young people come out of college with so much debt. It's a real burden, not just on them as individuals, but on members of their family.
Some people have criticized President Obama as not being as sensitive to the cause of black colleges. He said in a meeting with the Black Caucus about maybe some of the colleges should go under, and he's been talking about free college educations for 2-year colleges, which some have said would devastate black colleges. Your reaction with President Obama and...
Well, I was not in the meeting where this was said, so I don't know the context of what he said, but I heard that he did say something like this. I think the president is committed. I really believe this. I know the man pretty well. I believe that he's committed to seeing that these institutions continue to exist and get the necessary resources that they should receive, whether it's from the federal government or from the private sector. They're needed now more than ever. You cannot have a viable, growing, middle-class African-American community without young people receiving the best possible education.
Your impression of President Obama, thoughts on him that maybe people may not know about him and your interaction with him?
Well, I believe from the first time I met him, before he became president, and since he's been president, he has a good heart. And deep down within, he's good, he's committed. He received a raw deal. A lot of people in the American society cannot get over the fact that we have an African American as president of the United States. I've seen quite a few presidents going all the way back to President Kennedy. And as far back as I can remember, I don't think there's a single president been treated like this man has been treated. If my mother was still around, she would say, this president been called everything but a child of God.
We know what that means. Yeah. Any last words, thoughts for...
Well, I think it's important for people to understand we've made some progress. We've made progress. I tell young people all the time, when I was growing up, I saw those signs that said white waiting, colored waiting, white men, white women, colored. Those signs are gone. The only place we'll see those signs today would be in a book, in a museum, or on a video. So when people tell me nothing has changed, I feel like saying, come and walk in my shoes. To see President Barack Obama come to Selma and walk across that bridge is someone that told me that one day I would live to see an African-American president, a man of color, coming to a place where people almost died, where people gave some blood for the right to vote, to come to Virginia, visit North Carolina, where people pluck tobacco, and then other parts of the Deep South, people pick cotton. So these same hands that help pluck tobacco, help pick cotton, they help elect an African American as president of the United States. That's not anything to laugh about. So, but sometime progress is made slowly, and then sometime we can do it almost overnight. But whatever, we must never, ever give up or give in or get lost in the sea of despair. We have to continue to work, because our struggle is not a struggle that lasts for a few days or a few weeks or a few months or a few years. It is a struggle of a lifetime. And each generation must play a role and do its part.
Congressman John Lewis of Georgia, appreciate you being on the Wil LaVeist Show.
Well, thank you very much, brother. I'm very happy and very pleased to be on the show.
2016 National Book Award for Young People's Literature goes to John Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you. This is unreal. This is unbelievable. Some of you know I grew up in rural Alabama, very, very poor. Very few books in our home. And I remember in 1956, when I was 16 years old, with some of my brothers and sisters and cousins going down to the public library trying to get library cards. And we were told that the library was for whites only and not for colors. And to come here and receive this award, this honor with this, it's too much. Thank you. But I had a wonderful teacher in elementary school who told me, read, my child, read. And I tried to read everything. I love books. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Nate. And thank each and every one of you. And thank all of the judges. Thank you, National Book Foundation. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Wil LaVeist podcast at WilLaVeist.com. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Go to my website and sign up for the e-blast to learn what I've got coming up next. And check out the website for where you can listen to the show live. Until next time, take care and God bless.